Hello, welcome to this video tutorial on the social area for OCR psychology. There's an image that really was one of the basis of the major push of the social area in psychology in the 50s and 60s as a result of the Second World War and the atrocities committed by the Nazi Party in Germany, where millions of people were murdered. Um, and social psychologists wanted to try and figure out a lot of what makes people do bad things and what makes people do good things on the other side. So a lot of the research in the area does address some of those issues. And first of all, let's have a look at the specs. So, what do you need to know for each of the areas? In this case, the social approach, you need to know the defining principles and concepts. And so, we're going to have a look at that. We're going to mention a couple of bits of research, but obviously, the core studies in this area are the ones that you want to focus on for that. We're going to have a look at a couple of strengths and weaknesses, and you'll be discussing the applications of the area and how it's different and similar to the other areas in class. Okay, so first of all, what's the assumptions of the social area? So social psychologists, there's a picture of New York. If you're looking down on a city and you're watching people mill about and go about their business, if you're a social psychologist, you're interested in how other people around us, how does our situation impact our behaviours? So how does the surrounding environment, if you're wandering down a street in New York and somebody speaks to you, do you think that they're a weirdo compared to if you live in the country, nobody's around, and someone walks down the street and speaks to you and it's just the two of you that are there? How does that social context affect us? And one of the main focuses is this situation versus dispositional debate, and I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a bit. So thinking about these things, how the surrounding environment, social context affects us, we'll have a look at a couple of the defining principles. Sometimes when you're talking about assumptions of the areas in psychology, it's useful to think of another area, such as the physiological approach, for example. It's very interested in biology and how do our hormones affect us, how does our brain structure affect us, whereas social psychologists aren't really interested in those kind of things. So let's have a look. First of all, Tajfel, 1979. Tajfel was actually a a Jewish young man in Nazi Germany who escapes over the border to France, and then when the Nazis invaded France and they questioned people like him, he refused to deny. He didn't say that he was Jewish, but he refused to deny that he was Jewish, and as a result of that was put into a concentration camp, and I think all of his family died, and he was one of the only survivors from his family from Nazi Germany. And so out of that, he actually moved to England and became a researcher into in-group and out-groups. Now, he called this social identity theory. So who do we identify? Which groups do we identify with? And he argued that we go through this process of categorization. We define ourselves as Nazi or Jewish or Aryan if you're Nazi. We define ourselves by the football teams that we support. And we categorize ourselves into those, and then we can show in-group favoritism. So whenever we see someone with a Liverpool shirt on, we favouritize them, we favour them. But if we see someone with a United top on, then we belittle them and we see faults in them that we wouldn't see in the Liverpool fans. And the reason for this, the psychological component to this, is about self-esteem. We feel better about ourselves, about our own failings, if somebody else is there to criticise. So if we say, I hate United fans, I hate United, they always get favourable refereeing decisions, they're always dirty. Um, that's saying essentially we don't do that. We are better. We are more honest. We are overall a kinder race of people as Liverpool fans compared to United fans. And obviously, when you start getting into that, then you're prejudging people, and so this self-esteem is an important component of it. Why did people go along with the Nazis? Partly because they were just grateful it wasn't them, and yeah, it was, it was a time when Nazi Germany, when Germany was going through difficult times after the First World War. There was lots of unemployment, and for the Nazis to come along and say blame the Jewish people, people felt better about themselves by blaming the Jewish people. So you can see that happening in bullying at schools. You can see it happening, um, like I say, with different football teams, with different countries. Um, and yeah, you see it across the world, really. Russia to America, America to Russia. So there we go. Quite an important fundamental theory, social identity theory. Um, and then we had the Stanford Prison Experiment in 1971. Philip Zimbardo, who is part of one of the key studies, the Bacchiaro study that you're going to look at, um, Zimbardo created this Stanford Prison Experiment. If you haven't watched it, then pop the Stanford Prison Experiment into YouTube and just watch the summary of it, because it gives you a good background to where Zimbardo was coming from. Basically, they took volunteer students, they created a basement prison at Stanford University in California, and they randomly allocated these students to the role of guard or to prisoner. And they found immediately that the guards became abusive, the prisoners became submissive and initially antisocial, and then submissive to the guards. The guards started mistreating them and keeping them up all hours and getting them to act in socially sexually inappropriate ways and all kinds of horrendous things. And they had to stop it after 6 days, stop the experiment early. And really, as a result of Zimbardo's future wife, Professor Maslach, who turned up and said, what are you doing? These kids are getting hurt, so you need to stop this. And he'd become so engrossed in the role as prison superintendent that he kind of forgot to care about the ethical needs of his participants. So the big conclusions from that, this big defining study, was that the situation rules our disposition. Our individuality can be changed by the situation, just by giving us some shades and a guard's uniform or a prisoner uniform. We immediately change our individuality, our disposition. We can become people that we aren't. We can become evil. And that was the main arguments, and those arguments lasted many years in the social approach. Pilyavin is one of the core studies that you're going to look at, so I'll only mention this briefly, but basically it was, again, quite a pivotal study. It was conducted in New York, that's Central Park, and there's a express subway line, which means it doesn't stop at every single stop. There's local lines which stop at each little stop, but there's an express one that runs from here, from the southwest tip of the park, and goes all the way up to here. And that gives you a 7.5 minute experimental time zone to be able to act something out on a subway, and that's what Pilyavin and her researchers did. On a subway, they got people to collapse, and they measured the levels of helping, but they manipulated whether the person was seemingly drunk or whether they had a cane, so were disabled in some way, or that was the implication. They're actually students acting, and they measured the amount of helping. And what was interesting about this study was there was no diffusion of responsibility, which means usually in research previous to this, you've found that the more people there are, the less helping there is. Because if you see in a busy high street someone curled up in a doorway who could be hurt, But if there's hundreds of people walking past and not acknowledging that as an emergency situation, we also walk past. So she expected that if there was lots of people on the train, there'd be less helping, but actually the opposite happened. Because the people couldn't escape, they had to help to, deal with things like their conscience and things like getting the rewards. He came up with this cost reward model whereby you make a split decision whether you're going to help someone based on the potential costs to you in terms of time, in terms of physical harm, in terms of social pressure, and the rewards. You balance up the rewards of helping. You're going to get lots of praise from somebody, and you also balance up the rewards of not helping. You don't have to spend your time or risk. So yeah, it was called the Subway Samaritan study, an underground phenomenon, because Samaritanism hadn't been found in other pieces of research. It was just on the underground, where people couldn't escape. So yeah, so there we go. If we look back at the assumptions of the social approach, then you've got other people, you've got the surrounding environment, like in the Pili study, you've got the context and situation and disposition. If we talk about that for a second, situation versus dispositional debate argues, do we act the way that we do because of the situation we find ourselves in, or is it down to our individual personality? Disposition just means individuality. So in this context, these three who are bullying this kid, the situational reasons why this girl might be joining in could be because of the pressure from the other two. It's a situational factor. Opportunity to impress those two, and the majority influence. So because two of them are doing it, then she feels the pressure to do it because everyone else is. But her individual reasons, her personality reasons, it might be that she doesn't want to because she's been brought up to be caring or empathetic. She might have been brought up in a religious household saying that you don't do this kind of thing. There could be individual characteristics to her that makes her not want to do this, and that might stop her from doing it. She might stop doing this now and say, hey, come on guys, leave him alone. But also some individual characteristics can make you more likely. So if you do have low self-esteem and you've got this opportunity to get involved with two other people and boost your own self-esteem because you're not him, thank goodness, then that might make you more likely. So that individual characteristics. And guilt and morality might stop her from doing that as well. She might feel guilty. But if she hasn't got an advanced level of morality, if her moral development isn't very progressed, then she might want to carry on bullying him. Okay, just to finish with, you'll have these in your booklet, but the strengths and weaknesses, understanding how why the Nazis did what they did and other extreme social behaviours is extremely important. It's very useful to understand the functions of why that happens. We can recommend policy changes, change the laws in Parliament, make it illegal to allow people to walk past an emergency situation, educate people on the importance of not bullying and why it might boost your self-esteem, but it doesn't boost his self-esteem. So really useful research. But some of the weaknesses of the approach, this is a later Milgram study where Milgram was getting participants to force the learner's hand down onto the electrode. Now, it was obviously an act, but this guy didn't know that, and could have caused great psychological strain, and we know it did to a lot of the participants. But to truly understand social influences on people, we have to put people in these kind of situations, and that jeopardizes future samples. You're not going to get many people volunteering when they read about Milgram's research and then a social psychologist turns up and says, do you want to take part in a piece of research? So you can really put people off taking part, and we also have a moral duty not to harm others. So the other weakness is because of this early research being so unethical in the 50s, 60s and 70s, it meant that a lot of the research after that had to be scenario based, saying what would you do in the following scenarios, and we know that what people say they would do in situations is very different from what they would actually do. So the research, a lot of it lacks mundane realism and therefore is low in ecological validity, so it's not very useful compared to the early social research. Okay, that's the social areas to psychology. Thanks for listening, everybody.